The series starts with the sound of sirens and a male voice asking a man if he can hear him. A paramedic reports the man's condition. The narrator mentions that he was hit by a truck. A man is wheeled into the hospital, and we see a monitor. The narrator sounds bewildered by all the commotion. The machines begin to beep loudly, and the doctors ask the man if he can hear them. The scene fades to black. The narrator accepts that he is dying and wishes he had at least lost his virginity before passing. We hear frantic voices and a woman crying. The man's eyes open, and he thinks he's still alive. He sees two happy faces, a man and a woman, speaking a language he doesn't understand, leaving the narrator confused. The man picks him up and kisses him, and he protests, still believing he is an adult. The woman also lifts him, which makes him happy, and he enjoys being close to them. He tries to reach out to touch her breasts, but realizes he has baby hands. It hits him that he is a baby. He has been reincarnated. He learns that his new parents are named Paul and Zenith. Estimating they are in their mid-20s, he feels jealous of their youth as parents. The boy is named Rudius, and 6 months have gone by. Now he understands the language. The narrator introduces Lilia, the family's maid, mentioning that he's a big fan of her skills. At 6 months, Rudius is quite a handful, always getting into trouble. He wears a pair of panties on his head for fun. Zenith finds him and gently corrects him. She notices Lilia looks unwell and asks what's wrong. Lilia complains about Rudius's behavior and worries that he might be sick. Zenith brushes off her concerns, saying Rudius is just a baby and doesn't know any better. Rudius looks out the window at the beautiful countryside and figures his new home is somewhere in Europe. While he appreciates the view, he never wanted to live too far from town or in a place without electricity or gas. He enjoys being reincarnated but misses his computer. Spotting Paul practicing swordsmanship in the yard startles him, causing him to fall from the window and hit his head. He cries out, and Zenith picks him up and comforts him. Lilia worries that Rudius isn't crying much after such a fall. Zenith uses a healing spell on him, which Rudius initially scoffs at but is amazed by afterward. Paul comes in to check on the family, and Zenith explains what happened. She's flustered and frantic, but Paul reassures her and helps her calm down. Fast forward 2 years, and we meet 2-year-old Rudius. He becomes curious about magic, wondering if his mother will teach him. He goes off to find her, but instead discovers a chest full of books. Time skips ahead again, and Rudius has taught himself to read. He goes through books on magic and tries to cast spells on his own. It works, and he conjures a water ball by saying the incantation. He wonders if he can do magic without speaking. He tries wordless magic, and it works, but he passes out right after. He keeps trying. Rudius finds out that using magic makes it grow stronger, and spells can work without any incantations as long as there's intention behind them. The most important lesson he learns is not to believe everything he reads. Rudius spends a lot of time thinking about incantations, poring over the book repeatedly. He realizes he needs to develop his skills while he's young if he wants to excel. While Paul practices sword fighting and the neighbor women fawn over him, Rudius conjures a water ball and splashes his dad. He has finally mastered how to send water flying. He understands now that spells follow an order of operations, calling upon the element, setting the size, determining the speed, and releasing it. He's pleased with his success in mastering basic magic and wants to try intermediate magic. He recites a spell that summons a mini tsunami, blowing off a corner of the house. His parents initially think he's hurt, but Zenith sees the spellbook open and asks if he read any part of it aloud. When he apologizes, she squeals with delight and calls him a genius. Paul and Zenith argue about Rudius's education in magic and swordsmanship, and Lilia steps in, suggesting a schedule where Rudius learns magic in the mornings and swordsmanship in the afternoons. Paul and Zenith agree, and they hire a magic tutor for Rudius, a young demon named Roxy Magurdia. Rudius adores her and exclaims how tiny she is. She mutters some rude things about Rudius under her breath upon meeting him, and doubts his ability to grasp magical theory. She accepts the job and starts right away. She explains to Rudius that there are only 3 types of magic: attack, healing, and summoning magic. She also shares that spells and the mages who cast them are divided into 7 categories: elementary, intermediate, advanced, saint, king, emperor. She discusses the type of magical power needed for casting spells. Roxy demonstrates an incantation by calling forth a water ball, sending it out, and accidentally breaking Zenith's favorite tree. She heals it right afterward. Rudius conjures a water ball with a shortened incantation and admits to Roxy that he doesn't use incantations when casting spells. She's shocked and impressed. Zenith's tree falls apart again, and she scolds Roxy for breaking it. Rudius apologizes and encourages Roxy, who thanks him for the support. Zenith invites Roxy to dinner, which ends up being a celebratory feast for her. Rudius feels uplifted by this and is determined to be a better person in his next life. The episode starts with a funeral ceremony for 2 people. Incense is burning as the mourners pay their last respects, but there's an empty seat, likely saved for an important family member. The scene shifts to a man in a dirty apartment, watching something questionable on his computer. 3 men enter the building, one carrying a bat, and they head up to the filthy apartment. The armed men burst in, catching the man off guard. He stands up to confront them, but one smashes his computer with the bat. They throw him out into the rainy night, barefoot. He walks down the street and sees 2 boys harassing a girl. A truck is coming straight at them. He shouts to warn them, but they don't hear, so he steps into the road. Rudius opens his eyes. He's surrounded by figures he created with earth magic, which he makes disappear. He hears his parents loudly making love and decides to go down the hall to their bedroom to annoy them. On his way, he sees Roxy outside their door. He heads back to his room, determined to forget he saw Roxy. 6 months pass, with Roxy as Rudius's magic teacher. By this time, he can use intermediate magic. He enjoys his lessons, which now include evening classroom sessions. Roxy reads to him, and he listens eagerly. She reveals she's a demon and recalls how Rudius's parents were surprised when they first met her due to her hair color. She tells him about the green-haired demons called Superds, who are terrifying and went on a killing spree during the last war. She explains they killed everyone friends and Fosand were banished from the demon continent for being too violent. She teaches Rudius how to recognize them and avoid them. Rudius flatters Roxy, and the lesson wraps up. A year after Roxy starts teaching Rudius, his magic skills improve. He performs advanced magic and never runs out of mana. His sword skills need a lot of improvement, much to his mother's amusement. Rudius recalls being bullied in his past life and feels sad when he sees two boys playing near the fence. Roxy shares stories about her village, and Rudius wishes she would stay with his family forever. She talks to him about the possibility of studying at the University of Magic in Renoa. Time goes by, and Rudius is now 5 years old. His parents throw him a big party. Paul gives him a real sword and gives a speech about protecting his loved ones. Zenith gifts Rudius a magic spell book, and Roxy gives him a wand. She mentions Rudius's graduation exam. Rudius is scared to leave the house because of how he was bullied in his past life. Roxy takes him around the village for his graduation exam. At first, he's frightened of going outside, worried that the villagers will laugh at him, but he soon realizes they are friendly. He feels encouraged when the villagers greet Roxy warmly and seem to trust her as well. He begins to overcome his fear of being around other people. Rudius's final exam is to cast the cumulonimbus spell. When Roxy demonstrates it, lightning strikes Caravaggio the horse. Roxy apologizes and heals the horse, then creates a safe area with earth magic to protect him from being struck again. Rudius successfully casts the cumulonimbus spell, and Roxy concludes their lessons, declaring him a saint-class water mage. Before leaving to travel the world, she gives Rudius an amulet. He thanks her for all her help, and there's an emotional farewell for Roxy. Rudius asks his parents for permission to play outside the house. He talks to them about his behavior, and Paul lectures him on being kind and using his strength to protect the weak. He takes a walk through the village, enjoying being outside without fear. Rudius sees some boys bullying another boy and scares them off by throwing clods of earth at them, just like they were throwing stones at the boy. He notices that the boy being bullied looks like a Superd because of his green hair. The boy doesn't have a gem on his forehead but has strange ears. Rudius starts a conversation with the boy and finds out that he's half human and a quarter elf. The boy is upset about his hair color. Rudius becomes friends with him and introduces himself. The boy says his name is Sylph. Rudius is impressed by the name, and they start playing together. Sylph asks if he can do magic like Rudius, and Rudius offers to teach him. When Rudius gets home, he finds an upset Paul. Paul is angry because one of the mothers brought her son to report that Rudius punched him. He yells at Rudius about the incident, and makes it clear he doesn't want to hear Rudius's side. Rudius responds sharply, and as a result, he gets slapped for talking back. Angry, Rudius talks sternly to his father. He explains sarcastically, making Paul feel embarrassed. Paul apologizes and asks for an explanation. Rudius tells Paul that he used Paul's lessons about protecting the weak to stop Sylph from being bullied, which makes Paul sad about how he treated Rudius. Zenith asks Paul what's wrong, and they talk. Paul expresses concern about Rudius, saying that talking to him is like talking to a mature person. During summer, Rudius practices swordplay while training Sylph in magic. Sylph asks him to show him how to cast spells silently. Rudius explains how he does it, but Sylph struggles until he tries by himself and gradually gets the hang of it. When he does, he celebrates by joyfully running through a wheat field with Rudius. Tired from celebrating, they lie in the grass, and Rudius thinks about how Sylph looks, recalling a friend from his old life who was supermodel beautiful. It starts to rain, and they rush back to Rudius's home. At home, they meet Lilia, who draws a bath for them. Sylph feels embarrassed about undressing in front of Rudius. During swordplay lessons, Rudius has an off day. Paul asks if he's still having trouble with Sylph, and Rudius says yes. He's also upset that his swordsmanship hasn't improved. Paul advises him to show Sylph his softer side and be vulnerable with her. He tells Rudius to be honest with Sylph and share his feelings, no matter what. Rudius confesses his feelings to Sylph. She takes his hands and comforts him. Paul thinks Rudius may have taken his advice a bit too well. Rudius and Sylph decide to remain friends, and Paul gives them both a hug. Zenith is pregnant. Rudius congratulates her, and she tells him she knows he'll be an excellent big brother to his little sibling. Paul and Zenith are thrilled. Lilia reveals that she is also pregnant. Paul admits he is the father of Lilia's baby. Zenith, upset, slaps him in anger. Lilia and Zenith discuss the future. Paul tries to interrupt, but Zenith yells at him. Zenith considers her next step after Paul's betrayal of their marriage. Rudius steps in to talk to his mother about the situation, further angering Zenith. Rudius puts the blame on Paul and tries to defend Lilia. He creates a story where Paul is the villain and Lilia is the helpless maid, unable to resist his demands, which convinces his mother to let Lilia stay. She agrees and asks Lilia to stay. Zenith is very angry with Paul. Lilia cries in relief. Paul takes out his frustration on Rudius. Lilia stands by the window watching them, thinking about how she seduced Paul. She left her door open while bathing so Paul could see, and then he slipped into her room. Lilia feels she should have been punished and realizes Rudius's role in her forgiveness. She reflects on her feelings for Rudius and concludes that she owes him her respect. She vows to dedicate her child to Rudius's service when they grow up. Zenith and Lilia both give birth to daughters. Zenith's daughter is named Norn, and Lilia's daughter is named Aisha. Paul showers both his daughters with affection and is often found doing silly things for them. Rudius thinks Paul is uncool and decides he will be the cool big brother to his little sisters. After Rudius helps Lilia, she becomes more friendly with him and shares stories about his father's younger days. Rudius compares his sword fighting skills to his father's. Paul excels in all three sword fighting styles, making Rudius lose confidence. Paul tries to cheer him up, but Rudius responds rudely. Paul seizes the moment to talk to Rudius about his friendship with Sylphie. He also mentions school, which seems to interest Rudius. Paul jokes about Rudius going to school after learning to read and write. Sylphie practices wind magic under their tree, as Rudius thinks about school and how he might like to attend. He mentions to Sylphie how trapped he feels and hints at wanting to go somewhere else, but she gets emotional and cries. Rudius receives a letter from Roxy, where she shares her experiences traveling and working as a mage in the court of the Shiraun Kingdom. She tells him she has finally mastered king-class water magic and advises him to think about enrolling at Renoa University of Magic if he hits a dead end with his magic. Rudius reflects on Roxy's letter and considers enrolling in the university. He decides that going to university will be his next step and brings it up at dinner the following night. He asks his father if he can pay tuition for both himself and Sylphie, but Paul declines, saying Rudius is too young to be thinking about university, and they don't have the money for both of them. Rudius asks for permission to get a job to earn Sylphie's tuition so he can support her through the university. Paul surprisingly agrees to his request. One day, during sword lessons, a strange wagon stops in front of their house. A woman dressed as a warrior steps out. Her name is Ghislaine. They inform Rudius that they have found him a job in another city, and he is to start right away. Without giving Rudius a chance to argue or think, Paul knocks him out. He wakes up in a wagon with Ghislaine, who tells him they will be working together from now on. Rudius tries to come to terms with the fact that he'll be working with Ghislaine. She tosses him a letter and tells him to read it out loud since she can't read it herself. It's a letter from his dad, letting him know that his job will be tutoring a 9-year-old noble girl in Roa. He also mentions that he'll be tutoring Ghislaine in exchange for her taking over his swordplay lessons. His term of service is 5 years, and he's not allowed to visit home or write letters to Sylph yet. Paul gives these instructions to stop both Rudius and Sylphie from relying too much on each other. Throughout the journey to Roa, Rudius keeps thinking about his dad's letter. Ghislaine and Rudius arrive in Roa safely. Rudius is led into a living room and notices that a lot of the servants are beast people. He meets the mayor of Roa, Philip Greyrat, who is also his dad's cousin and the father of the noble girl Rudius is supposed to tutor. Philip asks Rudius what he knows about the job and realizes Paul didn't give him enough information to do his duties well. Philip takes it upon himself to tell Rudius about his daughter so he'll be better prepared when they meet. Philip's daughter, Eris, has a fierce personality, which intimidates Rudius a bit, but he decides to tough it out and introduce himself. Eris isn't impressed and yells at him. He talks back, and she slaps him for it. He slaps her back, and she punches him and beats him up. He uses wind magic to send her flying and runs for his life. Somehow, Rudius makes it back to where Philip is, and calls Eris the most vicious creature he's ever seen. Realizing he's talking to her dad, he backpedals and corrects himself by saying she's a fiery and caring young lady instead. Philip expects Rudius to be packing his bags and heading home by now, but Rudius is determined. Philip asks him what his plan is for getting Eris interested in learning, and Rudius suggests putting on a show to trick her into wanting to learn on her own. Rudius tells Philip what he needs, and they brainstorm a plan together. Rudius takes out Roxy's amulet and prays for the plan's success. The highlight of Rudius's plan is a fake kidnapping. He and Eris are kidnapped, and true to form, Eris yells, which draws the attention of one of their captors. He barges into the cell and yells at her to be quiet. She insults him, and he jumps on her and starts beating her. Rudius also gets punched just for looking how he does, and the captor, having asserted his dominance, leaves the cell and locks it. Eris, in pain, vows to get revenge on the man, while Rudius heals her wounds. He stands by the door, listening to their captors talk, which makes him anxious. He starts to realize they are really being kidnapped. Rudius uses earth magic to remove the window bars and tries to escape. He makes a deal with Eris, promising to rescue her if she agrees not to tell or hit him. Their bargaining gets a bit loud, catching the attention of their captors, but Rudius uses earth magic to bar the doors. Eris hesitates, and it's only when the captors nearly break into the cell that she agrees to help him. With one jump, they escape just as the chief captor bursts through the door and the earth magic barrier with wind magic. The captors start a chase when they realize Eris and Rudius are gone, almost catching up to them because of Eris yelling after Rudius fully heals her. Rudius leaves her behind since she broke her promise, but she follows him when she hears their captors close behind. Once they're away from danger, they find a coach to take them back to Roa. Upon arriving in Roa, they spot one of the mayor's staff, and Rudius approaches him, but then Eris is snatched away again. Rudius rushes to find her. When he locates her, he attacks her captors with magic and manages to free her from their grasp. The men turn out to be manor servants who offer Rudius gold to join them. He declines their offer because he has principles. He blinds them with a flash and then fights them with magic. He jumps in front of Eris to protect her and nearly gets killed killed by one captor's blade. Fortunately, Ghislaine intervenes, deflecting the weapon and decapitating the man in one swift move. Rudius is stunned by this. He thanks her for saving them. The conspiracy becomes clear to Philip. Eris is upset, and Rudius feels like he failed to motivate her to learn. He walks away, and Eris decides to accept him as her tutor. She also gives him special permission to call her Eris instead of Lady Eris, like the other servants in the manor. Philip congratulates Rudius on a job well done, but instead of accepting the compliment, Rudius apologizes. He asks why the captors were interested in him too, and Philip explains that a member of the Grey Rat family can be useful in many ways, both politically and physically. Philip assures him that his involvement will be kept off the record to avoid unwanted attention. The official story is that Ghislaine heard their cries and rushed to save them. Philip's wife, Hilda, walks into the parlor, and Rudius introduces himself, bowing the way Philip taught him the day before. She sighs at him and leaves the parlor. Another Grey Rat barges in to see Paul's son. Rudius introduces himself, and the man comments that Rudius is too polite to be Paul's son. He allows him to stay in the manor. The man is introduced by his butler, Alphonse, as the liege lord of Fitoa, Lord Soros Boreas Grey Rat, who is Philip's father and Paul's uncle. Lord Soros questions Rudius about how he saved Eris, but when Rudius tries to share the official story, he gets yelled at. He then mentions that Philip told him he shouldn't take credit. Lord Soros calls his son, who kneels before him. Soros punches him, sending him flying across the room. He scolds Philip, who then has to explain himself to Lord Soros. Lord Soros asks Rudius to teach Eris magic. Rudius agrees to tutor her, but prefers if she asks him directly. He explains why that would be better, and Lord Soros shouts for Eris. She comes to the parlor, and Lord Soros tells her to ask Rudius to teach her magic herself. She tries to ask Rudius in what she thinks is a polite manner, but it turns out she's just mimicking him and trying to be cute like the beast people. Rudius doesn't like it and yells at her for her odd behavior. He teaches Ghislaine mathematics, and while he's busy, Eris, left to her own devices, sets part of the mansion on fire to show off her fire magic. Rudius puts out the fire and gently scolds her, but she runs off to hide. Rudius has been tutoring Eris for about a month, and he has dealt with a lot of running and hiding whenever she's upset or scolded. She runs away again, and Rudius finds her asleep in the barn. He tries to wake her up normally. She punches Rudius again. Frustrated, Rudius talks to Ghislaine, who suggests that she and Eris should be taught together. Combined classes begin, and Eris proves as disruptive as ever. During one class, when Eris says she's bored, Ghislaine tells her about her early years as an adventurer and why she decided she needed someone to teach her reading and math. The story captivates Eris and encourages her to keep up with her lessons. Rudius spars with Eris under Ghislaine's guidance, and once again, Eris defeats Rudius. Ghislaine points out his weaknesses, and he tries to explain them to her. She tells him to work on his flinching. Eris spars with him again, and even though he's exhausted and complains, he gets back up to work on his swordsmanship. Unfortunately, his brief victory in getting Eris to focus in class quickly fades as she returns to her intense and aggressive behavior. Rudius, Eris, and Ghislaine get a rare day off and decide to spend it in the city. As they get ready to go out, Rudius takes it upon himself to remind Eris of the rules. He compliments her outfit, and she punches him once more. When they reach the market, Eris dashes from stall to stall, thrilled by the sounds, smells, and unique offerings. A merchant tries to sell Rudius an aphrodisiac. Rudius asks the merchant questions about it, and Eris confronts Rudius. He's holding a book and jotting down prices of market goods. Eris insists he explain what he's writing, and he does. He tells her he's comparing prices at different stalls. He gave his students a math problem, and, predictably, Eris gets it wrong. Ghislaine gets it right, and Eris can't understand why hers is wrong. Rudius goes to check out some books, and Eris offers to buy the one he's looking at. When he asks if she has any money, she says she'll get her grandfather to buy it for him. He declines, and she asks why. He explains that she doesn't have the right to spend money she hasn't earned. This sparks a discussion about money and value. He tells her what he earns, and when she's surprised, he explains why his salary is so low. Rudius suggests she ask her dad for an allowance, and she gets excited about having her own money. On their way home, Rudius spots the fortress of Pyrogius, the Dragon King, and feels alarmed. Eris and Ghislaine share the story of Pyrogius and Lapis, explaining how Pyrogius defeated Lapis in a war that ended 414 years ago. Rudius thinks about the war. Rudius notices that Eris becomes a better student when she gets regular breaks. Eris uses her allowance to buy the aphrodisiac potion from the merchant and presents it to Rudius. She declares that she's now better at math and can calculate properly. Curious about the potion, she asks Rudius what it's for. He tries to change the subject by running away, so she gets Ghislaine's help to catch him. During the struggle, the potion bottle shatters, and he accidentally reveals that it's an aphrodisiac. The women shake their heads at him, and his punishment is getting tickled by Eris. Ghislaine and Eris are fiercely sparring in the snow as winter returns. Eris deflects Ghislaine's attacks, and Ghislaine praises her speed and skill, promising that if she keeps it up, she'll advance to the advanced ranks. Rudius teaches both Eris and Ghislaine magic and arithmetic, and they quickly catch on. Time goes by, but Eris's mother continues to look down on Rudius, leaving him wondering why. Rudius excels at carving figurines and admires the one he made of Roxy when there's a knock at the door. He opens it to find an older woman named Edna Raver, who has come to discuss Eris's lessons. Rudius is thrilled to meet Edna Raver. She informs him that Eris's 10th birthday is coming up, and Lord Soros wants to throw her a party. She explains that nobles will attend, and that Eris needs to present herself well in terms of courtesy and dancing. The highlight of the ball will be a dance led by Eris, so she will need time to master her manners. Edna asks Rudius to forfeit some of his teaching hours during the week so she can train Eris in courtesy and dancing. Rudius happily agrees, thrilled at the prospect of a break from her yelling and punching. Delighted with the time off, Rudius decides to explore the library. Paul shows him around the manor's libraries, explaining different sections. With many foreign language books available, Rudius chooses to learn a new language in his free time. Since there are many beast people in the manor, he decides to study their language to better interact with them. He also opts to learn demon language just in case he needs it someday. However, studying demon language proves difficult, and Rudius finds himself struggling. He writes to Roxy, sharing about his new studies and the languages he's learning. As winter fades to spring, Rudius still doesn't improve at demon language. One afternoon, while puzzling over a book in the demon language, he hears Eris slamming a door and running off as usual. Edna approaches Rudius, asking for his help in convincing Eris to return to her lessons, since he's the only tutor who hasn't given up on her. Rudius agrees to help and goes looking for Eris, finding her sitting atop a large hay bale. Unsure how she got up there, he sits at the base of the bale. They talk about her dance lessons and how people force her to do things. Rudius reframes her responsibilities in a different light and offers to help her. Surprisingly, his words resonate, and he finds himself roped into attending a dance class with Eris. At the dance class, Edna pairs Rudius with Eris, but their first attempt is a disaster when she tosses him across the room in frustration. Dance class becomes torture for Rudius. Meanwhile, he sells his carving of Roxy to a traveling merchant at the market. As he spends more time with Eris in dance class, he remains stumped by demon language. Rudius receives a package from Roxy, accompanied by a letter. The package contains a demon textbook handwritten by Roxy, detailing the words, their uses, and meanings with illustrations. It's extremely helpful for Rudius. One day, Eris and Rudius finally make it through a dance class without incident, earning praise from Ms. Edna Raver. The party for Eris's 10th birthday is a big event, with nobles from various places gathering in the manor's ballroom. Everyone is dressed up, including Rudius, who has his hair slicked back and is wearing a formal coat that makes him look like a true nobleman. He heads straight for the buffet table to sample all the delicious food available. Eris enters the ballroom with her father and grandfather, and all conversation stops. She's got her hair styled and is wearing a stunning dress, but looks quite uncomfortable because she's overly aware of everyone around her and worries about saying or doing something that might embarrass her family. Once introduced, Eris curtsies to the crowd of well-wishers, though it feels a bit stiff. Rudius observes her and notices her discomfort. After the introductions, Lord Soros cheerfully challenges anyone who seeks the favor of the Boreas house to take Eris's hand for the first dance. At first, no one steps up until a brave noble boy asks Eris for a dance. Eris shows her nerves right from the start, dancing faster than the song's tempo. Several blunders happen during their first dance, ending with Eris on the floor. Guests begin to whisper about her. Rudius decides to step in and save Eris from the harsh whispers of the nobles. He asks her for a dance, and she agrees. She makes some mistakes in the first half of the dance, primarily dancing quicker than the music. Rudius inquires about her struggle, and she explains it to him. He realizes she knows all the steps but is struggling with the timing due to her nerves, so he suggests she close her eyes and think of the dance like swordplay. From that point, the dance goes smoothly, and Eris starts to enjoy herself, dancing with flair. The dance wraps up without anyone falling or throwing punches. Everyone cheers for Eris and Rudius. Edna gets Rudius alone and asks how he managed to help Eris so much, and he explains his approach. The young ladies at the ball gather around Rudius, complimenting him and many asking him for a dance. When Eris spots him, she drags him away by the scruff of his neck. Rudius, Eris, and Ghislaine chill in Rudius's room, where he gifts Eris a wand. She isn't interested at first until Ghislaine thanks Rudius for her gift. He goes on to explain how the wand works. Ghislaine gives Eris a talisman meant to protect against wolves. One of the kids asks if it works, and Ghislaine tells them a story. Eris wears the talisman and promises to cherish it. Once Ghislaine and Eris are asleep, Rudius strolls through the manor. He hears sounds of someone getting busy in the tower and decides to check it out. He walks in on Lord Soros and a beast maid, who quickly scurries away when Lord Soros calls out to Rudius. Rudius approaches him, and they both look out of the tower. There's a strange object in the sky that looks ominous. Rudius asks Lord Soros what he thinks of it, and he responds that he'd like to think of it as a good omen. Rudius is making great progress with his language studies and feels proud of himself. He enjoys learning new languages. Eris has reached an advanced level in sword fighting and is loving it. One day, Rudius spots Eris and a beast maid sneaking something into the kitchen, sparking his curiosity. He decides to follow them and sees the beast maids along with Ghislaine and Eris in the kitchen. Eris mentions that their plan will surely make Rudius cry. Rudius soon figures out that they're throwing him a surprise birthday party. Philip explains why the Boreas family has to keep him under wraps. The dynamic of the Grey Rat family is unusual. Since Paul has left the Nodos line, his brother is in charge there. If the Boreas line openly showcases Rudius, it could be seen as an act of war by the Nodos line. It's the day of Rudius's party, and the manor is buzzing with tension. Ghislaine is tasked with keeping Rudius in his room while preparations are underway. When Rudius tries to leave, Ghislaine stops him. Knowing about the party, he tests how far Ghislaine will go by showing her a figurine he made of her and asking to see the base of her tail for comparison. Ghislaine takes off her pants so he can see her tail, and just then, the beast maid arrives to call Rudius down for the party. When he gets there, Eris gives him flowers, making him emotional and triggering Lord Soros's protective instincts, prompting him to declare war on the Nodos line. They have to drag him away from the party to stop him. Eris's mother warms up to Rudius and suggests a marriage between him and Eris. Eris protests and ends up in a shouting match with her mother in the middle of the party. Eris presents Rudius with a magic staff called Aquahardia, which he likes. The party turns out to be a success, and everyone has a great time. When Rudius meets up with Philip, he finds Philip drunk. Philip tells him that Eris has two brothers who are with Philip's brother in the capital. He also explains that Hilda initially didn't like Rudius because it seemed unfair to her that she couldn't raise her own sons while someone else's son had free reign in her home. Philip echoes Hilda's marriage proposal so they can stage a coup to gain power. Rudius declines and goes to bed, only to find Eris waiting for him in just a nightgown. He suspects this is Philip's doing. When he tries to touch her, she reacts violently and storms out. She returns, and Rudius apologizes for his actions. She tells him they can do whatever they want if they can wait 5 years. Rudius is thrilled, but suddenly remembers Sylphie. Back in his village, Paul is dealing with monsters, causing him to miss Rudius's birthday party. Sylphie visits Paul's household and spends time with the women there. Zenith and Lilia discuss how Sylphie has changed since Rudius left. Roxy sees storm clouds forming over the Asura region and worries about what that means for Rudius and his family. From a distance, mana is pooling, and creatures from various kingdoms send emissaries to check it out. One ruler mentions that the cloud looks like the summoning cloud for the demon Lapis. He commands his servants to find and kill whoever cast the spell. Rudius takes Ghislaine and Eris to show them the cumulonimbus spell. He tries to cast it, and the clouds change. Ghislaine informs him that the mana is concentrated. A man named Elmonfi the Radiant attempts to attack them, believing Rudius caused the disturbance. He claims to have come on orders from Lord Pierogius to kill Rudius. Rudius clarifies that the mana pooling has nothing to do with him. As Elmonfi leaves, a bright light engulfs Rudius, Eris, and Ghislaine. Rudius finds himself in his past life's body, stuck in some limbo. An ethereal voice starts talking to him, and he demands to know who it is. The voice reveals itself as the man, explaining that he chose to step in because Rudius's life has been fascinating. He reassures Rudius that he's on his side, but Rudius gets angry and refuses to listen. The man clarifies his intentions, telling Rudius that his body is now in the demon realm and instructs him to rely on and assist the man with him. Rudius wakes up next to a crackling fire, with Eris sleeping beside him. He assesses his situation and recognizes the man across from him as a super demon. Attempting to defend himself, Rudius tries to cast magic against him and then speak in the demon language, but the man doesn't understand his question. The demon explains that he saw Rudius and Eris fall from the sky and make a fire for warmth. Rudius asks if the demon saw Ghislaine, but he hasn't. The demon then asks Rudius if he is afraid, to which Rudius replies it would be rude to fear him after he saved them. The demon finds Rudius strange, and Eris stirs. Rudius introduces himself, and the demon responds with his name, Ruigard Superdia. As Rudius moves closer to the fire, he asks where they are, and Ruigard tells him the exact location, the northeastern demon continent in the Bagoya region. Rudius reflects on how far they are from home. Ruigard inquires how they ended up in the demon realm, and Rudius explains that they were swallowed by a bright light of magical power. Ruigard pledges to protect them and vows to get them back home. Eris wakes up, screams, and cries at the sight of Ruigard, then hides under the blanket in fear. However, seeing Rudius calm with Ruigard gives her enough courage to come out. Eris introduces herself, and Ruigard does the same. Rudius helps ease the tension between Eris and Ruigard, and the three of them set off on their journey. Ruigard looks after them and shares what his third eye can do. Their travels lead them to a Maggard village, and Ruigard tries to get them inside. The chief comes to see the travelers, and Rudius introduces himself in their language. The elder greets Rudius and asks about the pendant he's wearing. Rudius mentions Roxy, realizing it's her village. Eris becomes enchanted by the village and their lifestyle, while Rudius learns more about Roxy. During their time there, Rudius reflects on the mana disaster and its possible causes. They continue traveling, with Ruigard planning to escort them the whole way. Rudius discovers that Ruigard cannot enter cities but isn't sure why. He also learns that Ruigard once saved a Magurdian child and is dedicated to protecting children. Ruigard's main goal is to restore his tribe's honor. When Rudius asks about the war, it stirs up strong emotions in Ruigard. Rudius encourages him to share his story. Ruigard describes how, before the war's final battle, Lapis gave the supered warriors new spears, which corrupted them, turning them into bloodthirsty beasts that killed everyone in sight, both foes and friends. He notes that few supered are left and discusses the war's impact on their reputation. Rudius sympathizes with the supered and vows to help Ruigard restore their honor. They receive their blessings and the Magurdians gift Rudius a sword. Eris curtsies and thanks them, and the trio continues on their journey. Eris violently slays monsters with her new sword and eats wild food like she was born to be an adventurer. Rudius, on the other hand, isn't doing as well since the food often doesn't match his taste. The trio heads toward the city of Rikarisu. While in line to enter, they see demons that resemble animals, and Ruigard shares insights about the various demon tribes. The gatekeepers inquire about a demon named Dead End, prompting Rudius to ask Ruigard who Dead End is. Ruigard claims he is the one and offers to jump over the cliffs to gain entry for himself, so Eris and Rudius aren't denied access because of him. Rudius, however, has a better idea. He camouflages Ruigard, allowing them to pass through the city gates without any problems. They plan to join the city's Adventurers Guild to earn money for their journey. They make a dramatic entry into the Adventurers Guild and introduce Ruigard as Dead End, eliciting mockery and laughter from the adventurers. Unfazed, they register their party under the name Dead End. They learn they are D-class adventurers and must elevate their rank by completing jobs. They can take on jobs in their own class and the one directly above it. Checking the job board, they find that most D-class jobs revolve around finding lost pets. One job mentions a lost kitten, but they feel disheartened by the request and the payout. Rudius ponders what to do next. As they exit, a road demon blocks Ruigard by sticking his webbed feet in front of him. Ruigard stares him down, and both demons reach a silent agreement. The trio continues on their way without much trouble and seeks a place to stay. Once there, Ruigard and Eris sit while Rudius goes to pay. Some demons attempt to speak to Eris in their language. Confused, she reacts violently, throwing them across the room and tearing her cloak in the process. Rudius apologizes for Eris, and the demons introduce themselves as the Tokurabi Toughs. They strike a team pose and offer to ally with the trio. Rudius thanks them but declines the offer. Eris is upset about her torn cloak, and Rudius offers to mend it the next day, which excites her as Rudius thinks about how they can earn money. The man god summons Rudius again for a chat. Rudius remains suspicious, yet the man gives him more advice and urges him to accept the job of finding the lost kitten, assuring him that he will have fewer worries afterwards. Rudius wakes up and considers the advice. He finds Eris awake, and she shares her concerns about returning to their world. He reassures her and sits with her. They set out to find the lost kitten, with Ruigard leading the way to a cave they explore. The kitten turns out to be quite large, and they encounter the demons in charge of the cave, leading to an attack. Rudius attempts to interrogate them, while Ruigard kills their leader for injuring Rudius. Horrified, Rudius tells Ruigard to stop the killing. Eris yells at Ruigard, and Rudius begs him to please stop so that he and Eris won't be afraid of him. One of the demons asks if Ruigard is a real Superd, to which Rudius replies yes. The demon then confesses that they've been kidnapping the pets and pretending to find them for the bounty. Rudius proposes that the demons team up with them so he can spare their lives. Ruigard becomes upset, and Rudius explains his reasoning. Angered, Ruigard lashes out, but Eris yells at him once more, compelling him to submit. Her words nearly make Ruigard cry. The demons follow Rudius's suggestion, and he gives them instructions while threatening them at the same time. The horseman, Nokapara, asks the two teams what they are discussing. When no one responds, he concludes on his own and departs. Roxy travels to an encampment and looks for Rudius's name on the list of the deceased. When she doesn't find it, she lets out a sigh of relief and feels grateful that he and his family are safe. She overhears people talking about Paul and asks if they know him. Paul has sent a letter to Rudius saying that Zenith, Lilia, and Aisha are missing and urges him to find his way home. He shares his location and gives instructions, asking for anyone who knows his family to help him find them. He provides his exact address for correspondence. The Dead End party takes a job to investigate a mysterious monster in a petrified forest. Eris asks about the monster and is eager to meet it. They discover other guild parties are already vying for the job. They decide to race the other teams, but Ruigard is concerned for their safety and doesn't want them to die. Rudius advises caution while following them and tells Ruigard not to rush in to save them until it's necessary. Before long, the other team gets surrounded by monsters, and Rudius makes Ruigard wait until the last moment to save them, putting Team Dead End's reputation first. One of the team members gets attacked by the monsters, and Ruigard rushes in to save them. Eris is fierce with her blade, and the monsters are taken down quickly. Unfortunately, the team member dies, and Ruigard is furious with Rudius for making him wait. He drags Rudius to a corner to shout at him. Rudius apologizes, but another team member points out it's their fault their friend is dead. Ruigard insists children can't be blamed, and she gets angry and lashes out at him. She shows her gratitude but admits her part in her friend's death. Ruigard apologizes for treating her like a child and recognizes that she is a capable warrior, which brings her to tears. The two remaining team members thank the Dead End trio for their support. The trio rushes toward the sound of a snake. It turns out to be a red hood cobra with an adventurer in its mouth. Eris wants them to do something. They charge the snake, and Ruigard slashes a gash down its side. Eris's blade has no effect, and Rudius's magical attacks don't work either. In the end, Ruigard holds the snake still for Eris, and she cleaves it in two. Rudius casts a spell on it, and the cobra dies. Eris celebrates their victory, but sadly the other adventurer is dead. As they enter the city, Nokapara waits for them. He figures out their plan with the other team, and threatens to report them to the guild, demanding money. Rudius thinks quickly. He reassures Eris and uses his magic to wash the dye out of Ruigard's hair. Nokapara sees this, screams in fear, and the crowd scatters. Ruigard grabs Nokapara and threatens him, which does the trick. Nokapara faints from fear. Authorities arrive to arrest Ruigard, who jumps over the cliffs and disappears, leaving Rudius and Eris alone. They leave the city to find Ruigard. When they catch up, he apologizes to them, and Rudius also apologizes to Ruigard. Ruigard tells Rudius he understands him, and emphasizes that there's no shame in being desperate to protect something. He calls Rudius a fine warrior, and Rudius asks Ruigard what that term means to him. Ruigard explains that warriors fight to defend the weak. He promises to stick with Rudius and Eris, advising Rudius to forget about reputation and focus on what needs protection. Rudius vows to help him restore the Superd's reputation no matter what. They share a laugh and a handshake. Eris notices them shaking hands and complains that they're leaving her out. She vows to take care of the two men, and they all laugh. Rudius shaves his head, and Eris compliments his new look. He gives her a leather thong to hide his third eye. Rudius admits his flaws to the trio, and promises to communicate better with them moving forward. They have a strategy meeting. The dead-end trio makes it to the ocean. Eris marvels at it and stands at the shore, eager to jump in and take off her armor to do so. Rudius is wide-eyed as he watches her remove item after item. Ruigard warns her not to go into the water because it's filled with monsters and isn't safe. Both Rudius and Eris groan about not being able to swim. Roxy travels with people she meets who know Paul. They were all part of the same adventurers party in their younger days. After a sea voyage, a man on the docks is seasick and stumbling around. The dead-end trio gets recognized at the docks, and they learn about their nicknames, which flatters Rudius until he hears his own. They find out that Ruigard's passage on a ship will cost 200 green ore coins, so they decide to think it over. Ruigard apologizes to Rudius for causing a hiccup in their plans. They take a couple of days to come up with a solution. Rudius is puzzled and goes to sleep, where the man summons him again. He lectures Rudius and tells him to buy food from a street vendor and take a walk through the back alley. Rudius is annoyed and asks why, but the man doesn't provide a satisfying answer. Rudius wakes up. Eris and Ruigard spar together. Ruigard gets distracted when he sees Roxy, allowing Eris to land a hit on him. She's thrilled and shouts in joy. Rudius follows the man's advice and runs into a Magurdian. He also comes across someone begging for food by the roadside and offers them some. After eating, the person transforms into her final form and thanks Rudius for the food. She asks for his name and introduces herself as Kishirika Kishirisu, the great emperor of the demon world. Rudius is not impressed but plays along, delighting her. She uses her eyes to read his soul and sees he has a reincarnated soul. She decides to grant him one wish because his generosity saved her life. When he wishes for fabulous wealth, she says it's out of the question because she's broke. When he wishes for half the world, she tells him she can't do that either. He asks her to pay him with her body, but she rejects that too. He queries what she can offer him. She suggests he choose a demon eye. He asks how much they are worth, and she says they're not worth any money, asking which kind he wants to have. She gives him the eye of foresight and offers to help him if he ever needs it. He tries to adjust to the eye and bumps into a man, pushing him out of the way just before a jar falls from above. He tells Ruigard he met the great emperor, who responds that he had no idea she was back. Ruigard tells him more about the emperor. Eris, wanting a demon eye, decides to see if the emperor will give her one. It takes Rudius a week to adjust to the eye of foresight, and it helps him improve at sparring with Eris. She congratulates him and tries to throw him down, but he catches her in a headlock. Ruigard praises Rudius for his performance. Excited, Rudius thinks he can beat Ruigard, but he doesn't stand a chance. He attempts to comfort Eris, who's jealous of his skills, and although he apologizes, she tells him it's unnecessary. Rudius reflects on his situation. Ruigard catches Rudius sneaking out in an attempt to sell his staff and stops him. They discuss selling valuable items, and Rudius always tries to take the burden of responsibility for the dead-end trio. They explore their options, with Ruigard advising him never to give up his weapon and to consider Eris's thoughts. Ruigard suggests that Rudius consider seeking passage from smugglers. The person Rudius helped comes looking for him and stumbles into his conversation with Ruigard, introducing himself as Gallus Cleaner. Roxy, Talahand, and Elenalise walk into a tavern. Elenalise comments on the quality of the men and leaves the group to flirt with a large crowd. Roxy wonders what Elenalise would do if she didn't. She tries to mimic Elenalise's posture to see if it works for her. Talahand leaves, and Roxy finds herself alone. Demons approach her, asking her to join their party. She turns them down, stating her rank as a king-class water mage. They recognize her, and Elenalise teases her about it. Roxy asks Talahand and Elenalise what Paul and Zenith were like as members of the Fangs of the Black Wolf. They all agree that Paul is worthless and decide not to dwell on him. Roxy is curious as to why they call Paul trash. Roxy discusses Ruigard and the dead-end party. Talahand explains the party dynamics, and Roxy thinks it over. They chat about their mission to find the survivors of the Fitoa displacement and how they plan to go about it. They consider the chances of the Grey Rats still being alive, and Talahand and Elenalise offer to gather intel the next day from their various sources. Roxy walks along the shore, thinking about Rudius. She bumps into Eris and Ruigard sparring and spots her pendant around Ruigard's neck. When Ruigard notices her, she runs away in fear, knowing he's a super demon. When she returns to their lodgings, she overhears Elenalize moaning in pleasure. She is appalled by Elenalize's boldness in her lovemaking and even invites Roxy to join them. Upset, Roxy throws Elenalize and her lovers out the window, damaging the inn in the process. She has to pay for the damages, grumbling about it as the party sets off. Elenalize asks what kind of man she likes, and Roxy shares her ideal man, getting teased by Elenalize. Gallus, the man Rudius saved from a falling water pot, turns out to be a smuggler. He agrees to smuggle Ruigard to Xanth Port if the dead-end trio helps him liberate some stolen goods when they arrive. They accept the deal. Rudius imagines a long-winded fantasy about him and Eris falling in love on the boat, getting shipwrecked, and ending up on a deserted island where they'll live happily ever after. His daydream doesn't come true as Eris suffers from seasickness the entire journey, requiring him to heal her after every bout of vomiting. They reach the shore safely, and Rudius settles Eris before heading to Ruigard. He picks up Ruigard at Gallus's hideout, where he sees all sorts of people and things. Ruigard tells Rudius that Gallus has kidnapped children and that guards killed one of them for crying. They devise a plan to rescue the kids. Rudius thinks of a non-violent approach, but Ruigard insists on handling the guards himself. Ruigard reveals his super nature, and Rudius rescues the children, healing their wounds. They are beast people, and Ruigard helps them out. He apologizes to the dead beast child for not being able to save him, while Rudius talks to the children in their language. The children make Rudius go back for a captured dog. There's a barrier spell around the dog, which Rudius breaks. The dog shows its appreciation by knocking him over and licking him. Rudius is thrilled about the dog and plays with it. A beast person confronts him for playing with the sacred beast, accusing him of improper behavior. He incapacitates Rudius, believing he's one of the smugglers. The beast people have come to rescue the children but find them missing. They race to the beast people's village to punish Rudius for the imagined crime of kidnapping and selling the beast children without giving him a chance to explain. Rudius records a commercial for a cell in the beast village where he's locked up. He highlights all its charming features, like its great location in the middle of the village, the nearby nature, the fresh air he's breathing, the toilet facilities, and the best part, it's free since it's a prison cell. He's hanging naked in a cell deep in the woods. A girl comes by, splashes water on him, and throws insults his way. The beast village seems peaceful and picturesque. Rudius is waiting for Ruigard and Eris to rescue him, and for the villagers to hear his side of the story. He wonders if Ruigard and Eris are okay while he waits. Then, the beast people throw another guy in jail, and Rudius tries to welcome him by flexing his authority and attempting to intimidate him. It works, and Rudius asks why he landed in prison. The guy says he got caught cheating. Rudius asks what he was cheating at, and the guy explains he was caught cheating at dice. He introduces himself as Geese, and Rudius introduces himself back. Rudius inquires if Geese has seen Eris and Ruigard. Geese says he hasn't seen them, and feels for Rudius about being left by his friends. Geese and Rudius chat into the night, getting to know each other. Rudius mentions he'd love to just set the place on fire and escape. They get into a debate, and then notice the forest is on fire. When they realize it, Geese asks Rudius if he started the fire. Rudius says no. There's a wildfire raging, and Rudius saves the guy. It turns out the forest fire was started by smugglers. The village is under attack, and the villagers are fleeing. The attackers are kidnapping beast children, and Rudius decides to save the village. Geese follows his lead, and Rudius casts a spell to summon rain to extinguish the fires, hoping no one gets hurt. This makes him a target for the attackers. The guy who locked him up thanks Rudius for helping put out the fire and asks him to assist in getting the children back. Rudius agrees to help. Together, they rescue the children and run into Gallus. Gallus reveals his evil plan to kidnap beast children and sell them for a huge profit to nobles in Fitoa. Rudius suspects the Boreas Greyrat family is doing business with Gallus, but decides to keep quiet about it. Gallus and the Beast Man get into a fight, and Gallus wins. Rudius and Geese learn that Gallus is a saint-class fighter in the North God style. Gallus is holding on to a distressed beast child. The Beast Man taunts Gallus, who takes it calmly. Rudius thinks things over. The cries of the child hit Rudius, but before he can act, the sacred beast appears to fight Gallus for having the nerve to steal their precious children. Rudius uses the Eye of Foresight to gain an advantage over Gallus in the fight. The battle kicks off, and Rudius ends up getting stabbed in the thigh by a knife thrown by Gallus. The sacred beast doesn't stop its attacks. There's an explosion. Gallus is defeated, and Rudius collapses from blood loss. He wakes up to find Eris and Ruigard at the beast village. The beast people ask for his forgiveness and express their gratitude. He asks Eris what happened to them during the week he was imprisoned. They fill him in on all the events that took place and how they eventually found him. In Fitoa, Boros is sentenced to death for neglecting his duty. The nobles think the mana disaster is somehow his fault and blame him. The region of Fitoa is given to another lord, who smirks at the scene before him. He gets tried and found guilty. He seems resigned to his fate as he kneels to accept his punishment and wishes Eris well before being beheaded. In the beast village of Dolja, Eris enjoys playing with the beast girls, while Rudius is caught hiding and watching them by the sacred beast and is threatened by the village elder's son. Eris teaches the beast girls how to fight. Rudius tries to teach the sacred beast to count, and Eris attempts to teach the beast girls the human language. Rudius is amazed by this and feels proud. Tona's father notices the ring on Eris's finger, and she tells him that Ghislaine gave it to her. Rudius describes Ghislaine, but there's a heavy silence afterward. Tona's father is shocked that she is alive, explains Ghislaine's past and calls her a disgrace to the Doldia tribe. Tona's father pulls her away, and Eris rushes outside to confront him. She recounts everything Ghislaine taught her and did for her, insisting that Ghislaine is her favorite person. He refuses to accept that anyone admires Ghislaine, and Rudius tells Eris to drop the subject. Tona's father is surprised that Ghislaine has become someone worthy of respect. Tona inquires about her aunt Ghislaine. Eris explains, and Tona shares what she likes about herself. Eris advises her, saying there are many ways to be strong. Tona asks Eris to teach her sword fighting. Eris agrees and wants to start immediately. Rudius and the Sacred Beast watch. Gyers muses about Tona and asks about Ghislaine again. He's astonished to learn Ghislaine is a sword king and laughs when Rudius mentions he tutored her in basic magic for years. He adds that Ghislaine also learned reading, writing, and arithmetic and is skilled in them. Eris and Tona train every day, and Tona improves over the months. Eris looks forward to the end of the rainy season, excited to move on, but Tona begs her to stay forever, explaining that her family is waiting for her. Tona feels sad. Rudius makes a figurine, which the Sacred Beast enjoys. The Beast Woman Guard tells them that a Sacred Beast appears when the world is in danger, and that when it matures, it will accompany a hero. She mistakes Rudius's playful attitude toward the beast as something else, and he corrects her. He is then called to settle a fight between Tona and Eris. Gyers steps in to separate them, and their friend explains it's Tona's fault for starting the fight. Tersena encourages Tona to apologize to Eris, and Gyers tells her that Eris and Rudius are leaving the next day. She pretends it doesn't bother her. Gyers tells her stories about Ghislaine's childhood, noting she was unruly and expressing relief when she was taken by a wandering swordsman, though he now regrets that choice. He asks if Tona wants Eris to leave without saying goodbye. Rudius talks to Eris about Tona. He hears Tersena and Tona outside and leaves with the Sacred Beast to give the three a chance to chat. At first, Eris is tough on them but eventually accepts their apologies. Tona gives Eris dolls of Rudius and herself. The next day, they pack up to leave, and the Doldia elder thanks them for their help. The girls share a tearful goodbye, and Gyers asks Eris to spar with him. She's thrilled about the idea. They spar, and it seems like they're evenly matched. Gyers tells them they're always welcome in Doldia. Eris cries as they depart. Geese joins their party, and Eris tells him their destination. They discuss the road they're on, the Holy Sword Highway. Geese shares a legend, and Eris expresses her wish to achieve similar feats. Geese talks about the monument to the 7 great powers, and Rugard adds to the discussion, explaining his training to defeat those powers. Eris decides she wants her name on the monument, but Geese notes he's not sure if the top 4 powers are still alive, which disappoints her. The quartet's journey continues, taking them through stunning landscapes until they reach Militia. Geese drops them off outside the holy capital city of Milis. As he says goodbye, Eris asks him to teach her how to cook next time. He questions why she wants to learn, and she hesitates. Geese asks them to keep the Adventurers Guild busy in the city. The Dead End team has another meeting to evaluate their progress. Rudius believes they should stay a bit longer and take on guild jobs to earn some money. He comes up with an idea to improve the Superd's reputation by giving figurines to the people they rescue. Rudius requests the next day off to create the figurines and write a letter to his family. Eris, having some free time, wants to go goblin hunting. He asks Rugard to join her, but she insists she can handle it herself. They agree to meet again the next day. As Rudius struggles to write his letter, he witnesses someone being kidnapped. His first instinct is to stay out of it to avoid trouble, but he decides to intervene. He follows the kidnappers to an abandoned house, where they feed the child. Rudius reveals himself, wearing panties on his face, to hide his identity, and confronts the kidnappers. A bandit captain enters and tries to fight Rudius. He tears off Rudius's disguise, and Rudius discovers that the captain is his father, Paul. Paul looks disheveled and intoxicated. Rudius asks Paul what he's doing there. Paul inquires if Rudius received his message. Rudius replies no, and Paul demands to know what Rudius has been up to all this time. Rudius explains he's just been surviving, prompting Paul to rudely cut him off, claiming Rudius has wasted a year. Paul scolds Rudius for not trying to find out if anyone else was teleported to the demon continent. Rudius is left speechless, admitting he hadn't thought of that. Paul berates him for helping Rugard while ignoring other victims, laying into him harshly. This angers Rudius, and he talks back. Paul makes inappropriate insinuations, which only fuels Rudius's anger. Rudius confronts Paul about his new girlfriend, leading Paul to punch him in the face. Paul then asks Rudius if he passed through Xanth Port. Rudius, confused, states that he doesn't know what Paul means. Paul tries to attack him again, but Rudius uses his foresight to anticipate Paul's moves, sending his father to the ground. Rudius punches Paul, with each hit fueled by his anger. He's about to strike again when Norn pushes him away, telling him to stop bullying Paul. Rudius is leaving the hideout when Paul reveals he wasn't the only one teleported. Everyone in their village was as well. This stops Rudius in his tracks. Paul mentions he left messages at the Adventurers Guilds in Xanth and Westport, asking Rudius why he didn't read them. He tells Rudius that while he was off enjoying himself, people died. Rudius is taken aback, scolding himself for not thinking ahead. He realizes if his entire village was teleported, Sylphie must have been too. Paul again accuses him of worrying worrying more about his girlfriend than his mother, emphasizing there's no trace of anyone. He insists the search and rescue squad exists to find the missing people. Rudius asks why the rescue squad is kidnapping people. Paul explains that since the people were scattered across the world, sold into slavery, and manipulated, they had to resort to forced liberation. Paul expected Rudius to have figured this out and start rescue efforts long ago, chastising him for sightseeing instead. Rudius feels defeated. He returns to his lodgings, deciding to team up with Paul. Eris comes back and sees Rudius looking down. Rudius shares what happened, and Eris is outraged. Rugard tells her to comfort Rudius. She tries, but struggles to find the right words. Instead, she hugs him and tells him she's there for him. She apologizes for her lack of comforting skills, and Rudius reassures her that she's doing great. Paul is in the village, holding Norn in his arms as she tells him she doesn't know where Zenith, Ayesha, or the house are. All Paul sees in front of him is a flat wasteland, and he wonders what made the village disappear. They try to get to the house, and Paul is drinking in the middle of the day when Geese shows up and suggests he swing by the guild if he wants to see a familiar face. Geese asks what happened to him while he was away, and Paul explains, but Geese says he's expecting too much from Rudius, who is still only 11. Paul thinks Rudius has it easy, and Geese corrects him, explaining what life is really like on the demon continent to give him context for Rudius's journey. Paul asks Geese why Rudius would act like it was a big adventure when it's actually so tough. Geese thinks Rudius probably didn't want to worry him. Upset, Paul still considers what Geese is saying. Geese urges Paul to be happy to see Rudius since he's safe, and to think about everything again when he's sober. Paul sits at Norn's bedside, imagining Rudius in trouble, which bothers him so much he tries to sober up. Across town, Rudius is having breakfast when Paul comes to see him, and Eris immediately gives him a hard time. Rugard takes her away, telling Paul not to be too tough on Rudius. Paul starts the conversation by asking about Rugard. Rudius asks why Paul has come to see him. Paul says he's there to apologize for yesterday. Rudius acknowledges Paul was right to be mad, and that he should be the one apologizing. Rudius feels bad that he missed Paul's message, which instructed him to search the northern central continent. Paul asks what Rudius plans to do next. Rudius wants to take Eris back to her home. Paul explains that there's nothing left there, just grassland, and mentions that the Boreos family might not be alive anymore. Rudius insists they'll go anyway and then search for Zenith, Lilia, and Ayesha. As he stands up, signaling the end of their conversation, the barkeeper puts a drink in front of him. Rudius thanks him and is told to look his father in the eye. Noticing Paul making a face, Rudius asks why. He thinks the face looks familiar, recalling that he used to make it in his previous life while isolating himself. The scene shifts to Rudius remembering that time, reflecting on his thoughts and feelings when his friend tried to cheer him up. Rudius suggests they pretend the previous day never happened and start fresh. He makes Paul hug him and tells him he misses him. Paul admits he misses Rudius too and starts to cry, sharing how he felt during their time apart. Rudius also cries, and their reunion feels complete. They catch up on their lives and have a great time. Eris and Rugard come back, and Rudius tells her he's made up with Paul. He explains to Eris why he reconciled with Paul, while Paul apologizes to both Eris and Rugard. Rudius heals Eris's bruise, and they hold a strategy meeting. He tells them that Paul has given them money and a letter of introduction, so they can leave the city and continue their journey to the central continent without worries. He shares news from their homeland, surprising Eris, especially when he mentions that her father and grandfather are missing and no one has heard from Ghislaine. Eris says she was prepared for that much. Rudius proposes leaving the next day, and Eris agrees. Rugard asks if he's sure, and Rudius gives a satisfying answer. Paul and Norn see Rudius off. Rugard advises Norn to cherish her siblings, and the dead-end trio continues their journey. Geese appears, heading off to continue the search for Paul's family. Paul calls a meeting for the search and rescue team. The dead-end trio is on a ship heading to the central continent. Eris is still feeling seasick and begs Rudius to heal her, but he's also seasick. Rugard is fine, and Rudius is glad Rugard isn't a stowaway this time, thanks to Paul pulling some strings. Rudius throws some light jabs at his dad, and Rugard calls him out, but Rudius says that's just their father-son dynamic. They chat about the kingdom they're passing through, noting it's the biggest rice producer in the area. They talk about eating rice, and Rise boasts about his skills. Eris isn't impressed and tells Rudius that if he's well enough to talk about food, he's well enough to cast healing spells on her. He goes over the trip agenda again, and thinks about all their missing family members, then heaves over the side of the boat once more. Meanwhile, Roxy is in a tavern talking to Nokopara about Blaze. They're old friends and catch up on how they've both changed. She agrees with Nokopara's take on her growth and shares what's changed in his life. He recounts how he got burned by Dead End, which sends Roxy into a panic. Nokopara calls her out for not visiting her parents. They argue, and Nokopara talks about his family to remind Roxy that her parents still want to talk to her. She brushes off his pep talk but decides to head to Magurdia to see her parents. She lists all the changes that have happened and mentions she can't communicate via telepathy, feeling unwelcome there. She reflects on her feelings about her village, hears children laughing, and sees them playing a game. She smiles at them and walks further to look at the drawings she made as a child. When one of the kids gets hurt, she rushes to help. She casts a healing spell, and the children try to thank her telepathically, but it doesn't work. She runs away and hides behind a house, looking up to see her own house. She goes inside and greets her mother, They share stories they've heard about her from visitors. Her parents ask her to stay a while before she leaves, then return to talking to each other telepathically. Feeling out of place, she tries to leave, telling her parents she has an urgent job that needs her to leave immediately, and she might not come back when they ask when they'll see her again. Her mom asks if she can visit every 20 years, but Roxy says she'll drop by in 50. Her mom is excited by this and says they'll wait for her. Her mother sobs and apologizes for crying. Roxy sees her childhood doll and remembers happier times. She recalls not understanding telepathy and how she felt realizing she was different. She admits she ran away because she thought her family would be happier without her, but she doesn't think that anymore. Her mom's tears make her cry too, and she apologizes for leaving without saying anything. Her mom hugs her, and her dad joins in. Roxy thinks that words and language aren't what matter most to her family. She wakes up to find her parents sitting around the fire. They exchange pleasantries and have breakfast. Her dad asks if she plans to leave that day, and she says yes. She tells them she's looking for her missing friends. Her dad mentions Rudius's visit to the village. She's shocked to hear about Rudius, Eris, and Rugard and faints. Her parents send her off, and her mom asks her to bring Rudius along. Her dad objects, and Roxy and her mom share a laugh. Roxy doesn't understand how Rudius could be traveling with a Superd. She pieces it together and concludes they are the dead-end trio. Arriving at her clubhouse, she blows up at Ellen Elias and her lovers again. They decide to head for the northern shore to find Zenith, Lily, and Aisha. The man calls Rudius again to float around and annoy him. They get into a verbal spat, and Rudius acknowledges the man's part in helping him survive. He asks the man to assist him in finding his family, leading to another argument. He also inquires about Sylphie, Ghislaine, Philip, and Boros. The man proposes a deal to Rudius, saying that if his advice helps Rudius reunite with his family, he'd like Rudius to trust him. Rudius disagrees, but the man just wants him to be less hostile. He promises not to be rude and agrees to trust the man. He uses Rudius's demon eye to see into the future and tells him exactly what will happen when he reaches the Sharoon kingdom. The man reveals that Rudius will find Aisha being held there and rescue her without revealing his identity. He also instructs him to send a letter to a contact at the royal palace of Sharoon, assuring him that if he succeeds, both Aisha and Lilia will be saved. Rudius wakes up retching again and thinks the man is using him. The trio arrives in Sharoun, and Eris raves about their capital. Rudius ponders the man's instructions, looking gloomy, which Eris notices and asks about. He tells her he heard some family members were captured in Sharoun. Ruigard asks for details, and Rudius explains. He asks for help gathering information about his family. Rudius writes a letter and sends it out. He wanders through the market looking for the alley from his vision. He notices someone following him and seeks a safe spot. He finds the scene the man described. The men holding Asha notice him and try to explain, but he starts asking questions. Asha runs to him and asks for help. He casts a spell on the guards, and they call for backup. The guards surround Aisha and Rudius, trying to force them to surrender. He tells Aisha to cling to him tightly, then flies them out of there. The guards are shocked. Asha introduces herself, and he introduces himself as the Moonlight Knight, following the man's instructions. She likes the name. Asha asks him to help her send a letter to her dad. She explains she's tried to reach Paul before, but the people at the castle won't let her. He asks if she has someone she can count on, like a friend or a brother. She says she has a brother but can't depend on him. He asks her why, and she tells him about a box her mother cherished that contained panties. She's horrified that her brother was obsessed with a pair of women's underwear before he even turned 5. She tells him everything she knows and declares that her older brother is a pervert. Rudius realizes why the man told him not to reveal his real name to Aisha. She asks him for his real name, and he replies that it's a secret, but mentions that most people know him as the kennel master of the party, Dead End. She's impressed and wants to hear the story. Rudius changes the subject and goes to save Lilia. He instructs his party to call him the kennel master in front of Aisha. When Eris asks why, he explains he has a plan to show Aisha his good side. They plan to storm the castle, and Ruigard and Eris are excited to go, but Rudius stops them to wait for guidance first. Rudius is woken up by a member of the Prince of Sharoun's Imperial Guard, who introduces herself as Ginger York. She has been sent to take Rudius to the palace on Roxy's orders. He hurries and wakes Eris along the way. Eris asks for a formal introduction. Ruigard checks if he's okay, and he responds that he is fine. Eris accidentally mentions Rudius's name, but Aisha doesn't hear her. Rudius is amazed by the size of the palace. Ginger shares what Roxy has said about him. They enter the palace through a side door. Ginger takes Rudius's staff and bag. She starts to say something but stops herself. She announces Rudius, and a male voice tells him to enter. It's the Prince of Sharoun, and he has Lilia tied up at his feet. He captures Rudius and binds him with barrier magic. The prince mocks Rudius and asks where Roxy is. He makes it clear that he plans to use Rudius as bait for Roxy. Thinking Rudius is Roxy's lover, Rudius corrects him, saying he is not her lover, but her apprentice, which seems to upset the prince even more. The prince reveals his twisted plans for Roxy, which include forcing her to bear his heirs against her will, and killing Rudius in front of her. Rudius asks how the prince plans to inform Roxy. The prince has no answer for that, but assumes she will find her way back to Sharoun somehow. He leaves Rudius in captivity and sends his guards to hunt for Aisha, threatening them as he does. does. Rudius listens and then attempts to mentally retrace his steps to see where he might have gone wrong. The episode starts with a look at what Rudius's family was up to during the mana explosion, focusing on how Lilia saved Aisha. They end up at the bottom of the river, with Lilia swimming to safety while holding Aisha. They make their way to the front gates of the Shirun capital. Lilia approaches the castle gates to request an audience with Roxy and is overheard by Pax, who locks them up. This explains how Lilia and Aisha end up serving Pax in the Shiraun Palace. Meanwhile, Rudius is in a protective barrier circle, bored out of his mind while praising his cell. He tries to break the barrier but fails, and then prays to Ruigerd and Eris for rescue. Suddenly, the door opens, and a tall, lanky figure comes down the stairs to Rudius. Introducing himself as Zanoba, the third prince of the Shiraun kingdom, he asks Rudius for his name. Rudius complies and inquires why Zanoba is in his cell. Zanoba then questions him about the demon figurine he carved, and Rudius lies, claiming he found it during his travels in the demon continent. Zanoba scoffs, saying such a masterpiece could only be made by demons. He asks if Rudius knows who the artist is, but Rudius denies it, saying he liked the figurine without knowing the details. Next, Zanoba reveals the figurine he carved of Roxy. He explains how his brother bought it and how Roxy left the court, going on a long rant about the figurine's features and its erotic nature, including the detachable robe and her 3 arms. He is very enthusiastic about the figurine and the skill behind it. Rudius is excited but notices the mole under the figurine's armpit is missing. Zanoba explains he shaved it off because it was distracting from the beauty. Rudius is shocked and tells Zanoba why the mole is significant. Zanoba is upset about ruining a priceless piece of art. Rudius offers to fix it, confirming that he is indeed the artist. Zanoba bows and asks to call him master, wanting to seal his loyalty with a kiss but ends up bumping his lips against the barrier instead. He complains about the barrier and laments not being able to reach his master. Elsewhere in the palace, a guard says a secret code and a door opens for him. He leads Aisha, Ruigerd, and Eris down the steps, thanking Eris and Ruigerd for their help on short notice. Eris demands to know Rudius's whereabouts, and the guard tells her. He explains to her and Ruigerd they need their help to rescue their families. Ruigerd asks for more details, and the guard reveals that Prince Pax has taken their families hostage to gain military power. Aisha clarifies his motivations to Eris. The guards inform them that they are tied up and need their assistance. Eris agrees, but Ruigerd insists she stay with Aisha, stating that guarding Aisha is crucial. Eris agrees to stay behind. When the guard attempts to guide him, Ruigerd declines help, saying he has already found them. Zanoba searches for a way to release the barrier. Rudius asks if any of his subjects are barrier experts, and the guard informs him he has no subordinates, trading Ginger to Pax for the Roxy figure. Rudius thinks Zanoba is as dumb as his brother and comments that he'll be trapped there forever, never learning anything from him. Zanoba is heartbroken and cries about it. Rudius tells him that if he can find someone to get him out, he'll take him on as an apprentice. Zanoba says he just has to deal with Pax and promises he won't keep Rudius waiting long. Eris and Aisha see palace guards running around with hot iron restraints, and Eris asks Aisha what's going on. The guards are called for an emergency, and Aisha explains there's a madman in the castle. The guard's equipment is for restraining him when he goes out of control. She mentions this person is a blessed child, meaning he has some unique abilities, and this one has insane physical strength. He's valued by the kingdom for his military potential no matter what he does. She shares that when he was 3, he decapitated his baby brother, and now he kills anyone who annoys him. Eris is impressed by his strength and wants to fight him. Suddenly, they hear Pax screaming. The guards surround Zanoba, begging him to let Pax go, but he drags him to the dungeons and dangles him in front of Rudius. Ginger rushes in and demands Zanoba to release Pax. All the guards and Eris watch this scene unfold. Zanoba tells Pax that if he wants to save himself, he needs to let Rudius go. Pax refuses, and Zanoba squeezes harder. Ginger pleads with Zanoba to stop, and Pax threatens her family. Eris laughs at Pax and tells the guards that Ruigerd is rescuing their families. Ginger puts down her weapon and goes back to supporting Zanoba, who threatens to behead Pax. Pax finally agrees to let Rudius go. Zanoba releases him but breaks Pax's hand for good measure. Rudius is freed, and the guards get their families back. Rudius explains the backstory. He walks up to Aisha and pats her head. Zanoba runs to Rudius and tosses him into the air. He lands awkwardly on his back. Aisha asks Eris to tell her about their adventures, and she agrees. Rudius starts loading the wagon. Lilia brings Rudius his treasure box. He sees a strange pendant inside and asks about it. Lilia tells him it's Sylphie's gift for his 10th birthday. He remembers Sylphie. Lilia hugs him, wishes him a happy birthday, and apologizes for missing it. He points out that she's touching him. She calls him crude but is glad he hasn't changed. She says she's happy he's alive, and he replies he's glad she and Aisha are safe. Lilia asks if Aisha has been disrespectful to him, and he says no. He calls her brilliant and compliments Lilia on raising her well. Lilia responds that Aisha hasn't quite matched his incredible traits, calling her relatively dull. Aisha runs up to ask him for a favor. She wants to join them on their journey. She talks about being being destined to serve her half-brother someday and cries that she doesn't want to. She begs him to save her. He's at a loss for words. She mentions making babies, and he cuffs her, saying kids shouldn't talk about that. He takes off his neckpiece and gives it to her to keep, explaining that it means leaving part of himself with her. He connects it to her brother's mementos. She understands and accepts it. He smiles at her, and she's captivated. They share a laugh, and Lilia is pleased they get along. As the wagon leaves with Lilia and Aisha, they wave goodbye, and Aisha promises they'll meet again. She apologizes to Rudius for calling him a pervert, and hopes he's not mad. Rudius is surprised, and Eris says Aisha's smart and saw through him from the start. He wonders how she figured it out. Pax and Zenoba are exiled, and the kingdom claims they're studying abroad to save face. A figure lies in the snow, and Rudius reflects on how bad things always happen out of nowhere. He shares a long story about his life, from his past to his present, highlighting how events unfold suddenly. He states that no matter who you are, the suddenness of people's deaths is the one undeniable truth. Rudius, Eris, and Ruigerd embark on a tough journey. They encounter red dragons, and Eris expresses her desire to hunt one someday. Eris and Ruigerd train together, appearing evenly matched. Rudius watches their fierce sparring, captivated. When they finish, he claps and tosses towels to both of them. Ruigerd tells Eris she can now consider herself a warrior. He assures her that she's an adult and has strength equal to the greatest warriors of their time. Rudius agrees with Ruigerd's words. Eris thinks it's a dream and asks Rudius to pinch her. He pinches her in an inappropriate place, causing her to punch him, sending him flying across their campsite. She echoes Ruigerd's advice not to get cocky, noting that it means he won't treat her like a child anymore. Their journey leads them to a snowy mountain pass where they see the dragons. Eris is eager to fight them, but Ruigerd urges her to be rational. He informs her that some of the strongest fighters wouldn't stand a chance against the dragons because they attack in groups. Ruigerd explains that only the most skilled could confront an entire herd of dragons. Ruigerd and Eris freeze, their eyes wide. Rudius feels confused, staring into the mist until he spots two figures walking toward them. They pass by and stop. Ruigerd tells the other two to stay still and not move a muscle. Their pack animal bolts off and jumps off a cliff. One of the mysterious men asks if he's Ruigerd. Rudius uses his foresight to predict the man's next move. The man correctly identifies Eris but does not recognize Rudius. Ruigerd and Eris inquire about their identities and how they know them. The man mentions that they are in a strange place, but it doesn't matter to him, and he can't do anything about it. He turns to leave, but Rudius calls him back. Rudius introduces himself, and the man introduces himself as Orsted. Rudius asks how he knows Ruigerd and Eris, to which Orsted replies he doesn't know them. He questions Rudius about his parents, claiming Paul shouldn't have a son, only 2 daughters. Orsted steps toward Rudius, but Ruigerd tells him to stop. He notices Rudius is maintaining eye contact and points it out. He asks Rudius what he wants. Rudius asks if Orsted knows about the mana disaster, but Orsted says he doesn't, and Rudius apologizes. Orsted then inquires if Rudius is familiar with the man and attacks him when Rudius confirms that he is. Ruigerd pushes Rudius aside and faces the attack. Orsted accuses him of being an apostle of the man, while Ruigerd tells Rudius to take Eris and run. Orsted knocks Ruigerd out and turns his sights on Rudius. Eris tries to block the attack, but he tosses her aside. He tells Eris that she has a lot of potential, but she needs more training. He attacks Rudius, making him spit up blood. He gives Rudius a message to deliver to the man when he dies. Eris attempts to use fire magic against Orsted. Rudius casts spells, but Orsted counters them. He summons a dragon, and Rudius conjures purple flames to fight Orsted's dragon. Orsted starts to think Rudius might be on par with Laplace. He ends up killing Rudius right in front of Eris, leaving her heartbroken. Eris cries out for someone to save Rudius. Rudius wakes up again in the man's realm. They have a chat. Rudius asks the man why Orsted attacked him when he found out he knew him. The man explains it's because he is the wicked dragon. Rudius criticizes the man for not warning him about the dragon. The man says he can't see anything about the dragon god. He explains that the curse of the dragon prevents him from seeing him. The man tells Rudius that the dragon is a cursed child with 4 curses. He explains that one of the dragon god's curses is that every living being either hates or fears him. He notes that Rudius does neither because he's from another world. He tells Rudius it was similar with Ruigerd due to the curse of the spears. The man reassures Rudius that the curse on the Superd will gradually fade. The man god continues explaining curses to Rudius and discusses the dragon's strength. They chat about the hierarchy of the gods. The man informs Rudius that he's not dead yet. Rudius wakes up and gags. He wonders why he is still alive. Eris explains that Orsted returned and used a healing spell on him. Rudius is bewildered. He hugs Eris, and she lightly punches him while crying. He apologizes for worrying her, and she feels relieved that he's okay. The episode starts with blood dripping onto the floor. Rudius is in the ballroom, surrounded by family and friends who are talking and having fun. Sylphie, Roxy, and Eris stand in front of him, and he sees dragons. Blood runs down his face, obscuring his vision. A picture shatters, and he finds himself alone in the ballroom. Time seems to reverse, and he's back in his old body, standing in his apartment. He looks outside and sees the people from his new life. It looks like he's leaving them. As he calls out for them to wait, a hand punches through his chest, creating a gaping hole. He wakes up, and Ruigerd asks if he's okay. Ruigerd asks Rudius about the man, and Rudius explains. He tells Ruigerd that the Superd's terrible reputation comes from a curse. He also explains what Laplace did to the spears he gave to the Superd. Rugard looks downcast, but Rudius reassures him that the curse is fading and that cutting his hair helped. Rugard feels relieved, and Rudius goes back to sleep. As they travel, Rudius tries to figure out one of the spells Orsted used against him. Rudius arrives at his childhood home and finds it in ruins. He reminisces about the memories made there. He goes to his tree and thinks of all the time he spent with Sylphie. Rugard and Eris come to keep him company. Rugard announces his plans to leave, telling Rudius he's in debt, and that Rudius taught him he has more options than he ever realized. He promises never to forget a moment of their time together, and thanks Rudius for his help. He tells Eris she has incredible talent, and praises her boldness. He asks if he can treat them like children and pats their heads. Eris cries a lot. Rugard wants to return Rudius's amulet, but Rudius tells him to keep it. He says they'll meet again and walks away. It's a bittersweet goodbye for Rudius, and he cries too. Rudius and Eris head to Fitoa, finding tents outside the city walls. Eris spots Ghislaine and calls to her. She gets off her horse and rushes to Ghislaine. The butler greets them and tells Rudius to wait outside. Eris argues, and the butler brings the news that her parents and grandfather are dead. She asks him if he's sure, and he tells her that her father and mother were teleported together and died in the conflict zone. Her grandmother was blamed for the mana disaster and was beheaded. Rudius becomes upset, and Eris tells him to sit. The butler explains that Lord Philome Nodos Greyrat wants Eris to be his concubine. Ghislaine asks if he's serious about the proposal. He replies that he's focused on the Boreas family legacy and the people of Fitoa, not necessarily on Eris or her feelings. Ghislaine tells Eris she doesn't have to do what the butler says. She suggests that Eris run away to find happiness. Eris tells them both to shut up and go away so she can think, even sending Rudius away too. She starts to cry. Ghislaine crosses names off a list and tells Rudius it's a list of missing people when he asks what it is. Sylphie's name is crossed off, which alarms Rudius. Ghislaine asks if he's checked the names of the dead. He does, and since her name isn't on it, he feels assured that she's alive. Rudius is lying on his bed and staring into space when Eris asks to see him. He asks what she wants to do. She doesn't care about the situation and tells Rudius she's all alone. She reminds him that she's turned 15, and he apologizes for forgetting and not getting her a present. He asks her what she wants, and she says she wants a family. The next day, Rudius is excited about the experience he just had. He finds out that Eris is gone. She left locks of her hair on his floor and a note. He rushes to Alphonse to ask where Eris is. Alphonse tells him that Eris set out on a journey with Ghislaine and told him not to inform Rudius. Heartbroken, Rudius thinks he's been abandoned and cries his eyes out in pain. Eris and Ghislaine are resting by a fire. Eris stirs, and Ghislaine tells her she can keep sleeping. Eris replies that she's fine and that it's dawn. They continue their journey. Rudius feels sad that Eris has left him. People start to plant their fields, hoping for better times ahead. Rudius is back in his old life, waiting in line for the cafeteria. Some guys cut in front of him, and he tries to confront them. They beat him with basketballs and decide to strip him and hang him where everyone can see. He sits alone in his room and resists everyone's attempts to comfort him. He cries because he feels humiliated and isolated. Rudius hides in his tent, but Alphonse comes to pull him out of bed, asking for his help to dig some wells and build houses. Alphonse mentions that he plans to report Eris's death, which perks Rudius up. Alphonse explains that revealing Eris's death might stop their reconstruction efforts, so they'll hold off on the announcements. He shares his plan to restore Fitoa to its former glory, but Rudius tells him to leave him alone. Alphonse explains the situation further to Rudius and reminds him that he's not the only one suffering. After Alphonse leaves, Rudius reflects on what he should have done differently. Meanwhile, Eris defeats a monster, and Ghislaine asks her if she's sure this is what she wants. Three men thank another man for his help, and that man turns out to be Ruigard, who introduces himself. Eris talks about Rudius while walking with Ghislaine, saying she wasn't afraid when he was with her. The three men ask Ruigard questions about being a superd. Eris mentions her worries about being a burden to Rudius after considering his possible death. The men admire Ruigard's gem, and Eris feels she held Rudius back. Ruigard tells the men that super don't eat children. Eris admits that she loves Rudius and wants to be with him but doesn't feel worthy yet. She wants to become stronger so she can be his equal. Rudius sinks deeper into sadness. A wagon carrying Zanaba travels along a snowy path. Geese walks a desert path, thinking about how Rudius could conjure water to quench his thirst. Tina and Jirs practice fighting, and he gives her tips to improve her stance. The last two Takanobu warriors get the chance to visit the ocean, and someone asks if they've met Dead End. Rudius continues to wallow while listening to his family talk. Talahand, Kishiriku, and Roxy compete in a drinking contest, and Kishiriku wins. Roxy wakes up in a bar and sees the bartender threatening Kishiriku for not paying her tab. The bartender grabs her to sell her, but Roxy offers to pay instead. This causes her to break down, and Kishirika offers to reward her. Roxy demands a reward, and Kishiriku introduces herself as the great emperor of the demon world, offering to give Roxy a demon eye. However, Roxy wants her to use the eye to locate someone for her, specifically Rudius's family. Paul rushes down the stairs to greet Aisha and Lilia. Lilia bursts into tears, and Paul tries to comfort her. Norn looks for Zenith but doesn't find her. Paul explains to Norn that Zenith is waiting for Rudius to find her. Kishirika tells Roxy that Paul, Aisha, Lilia, and Norn have happily reunited in Malaysia. volition. She can't sense Zenith, but informs Roxy that she is on the Beggarith continent in the labyrinth city of Repe. Roxy confirms that Zenith is alive, and then asks about Rudius. Kishirika says Rudius is on the central continent and is feeling depressed. Roxy thanks Kishirika for her help, shares the news with her party, and Elenalize wonders why Zenith hasn't reached out. Roxy speculates that Zenith might be in trouble. Rudius stews in his depression about Eris, reflecting on his past life. He decides to keep dreaming. Rudius dreams about his family dynamic from before. Zenith says she's sleepy, and Rudius offers to clean up, which she accepts on the condition that he wakes her when he's done. Rudius bosses everyone around, and his mother thanks him, telling him she loves him. Rudius wakes up and realizes he needs to go find his mother,